the Rose Bowl. Number 4 Alabama versus number 1 Michigan. Michigan is a 1.5-point favorite in this one, and the over-under is at 44.5. That means something to you, you let me know. Over here, I do the college football, the Bear, and my guy Jeff Schwartz, they do the betting podcast. You should go see them about overs and unders. But I do think this is a good way to get us started in that I didn't think that people would really be betting on Michigan to win. And that's what this represents, right? Now, 1.5 points ain't much of a spread. That's almost a pick 'em. And if you are Alabama, you feel really good about this. There's a number of reasons as to why. And I want to get into those reasons by starting to talk about the storylines ahead of this game. Now, for me, I am a Nick Saban stan. I love Nick Saban. I love Miss Terry. I love that they have won 7 national championships. And I also like that they put fear into the hearts of Michigan men. I say that because Nick Saban became the first head coach at Michigan State to beat Michigan in his year 1 ever. That was 1995. Saban recently beat Michigan in the 2020 Citrus Bowl. Kind of lives rent-free in the heads of all Michigan men. Now, that's the rail. The nut graph is that we're talking about Nick Saban having won 7 national championships in the past 17 years. That's outstanding and ridiculous because it is one of the seminal achievements, I think, in sports because he coaches in the toughest conference in the sport, in the toughest era of football that we have ever seen. Others have come, others have gone, and yet Nick Saban continues to find ways to win. This is a man who's been coaching football since 1971 and has won in every iteration of the sport. He doesn't moan and complain about going from the Bowl Coalition to the BCS. He doesn't complain about going from the BCS to the College Football Playoff. He doesn't complain about the game getting out of hand because offenses are slanted, or maybe he does complain. He just goes and wins anyway. Name, image, and likeness, he's got it. Transfer portal, he's got it. Changing the coordinators, he's got it. Nick Saban has it like that. As a matter of fact, the greatest living professional football coach calls Nick Saban the greatest there is. The Dragon Balls are all with Saban as far as Bill Belichick is concerned. The quote here is, "There's nobody I respect more in football than Nick Saban. And I don't think there's a better coach than Nick Saban." Belichick said that on NFL Plus's Nick Saban, the greatest college coach of all time. Saban has produced more first-round NFL draft picks than anybody else. Nobody's put more first-rounders into the NFL than that man. Means that, quite honestly, in the words of the babyface Canadian, he's the best there was, he's the best there is, and I think he's the best there ever will be, right? That's on top of this team that he's coaching, the 2023 team. We didn't think it was going to be that good. And you know what? We had good reason to. They're very, very young, incredibly young, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They're incredibly young at quarterback, and they were unproven at quarterback. He changed over both of the coordinators, one in Kevin Steele, who he's familiar with, but still coming back in what is basically a year 1 as defensive coordinator. And then he goes with an offensive coordinator that is younger than I am, in Tommy Rees, in year 1, sticks him with 3 quarterbacks, one in which he kind of sort of knows in Tyler Buckner, 2 in which he's having to learn. And he's got to cycle through those guys through the first 2-3 games to find out what's what on that Alabama offense and then build it around what Jalen Milroe does best. But this is also important for me because they made the college football playoff in a year in which we did not expect Alabama to be that good, especially after they lost by double digits to Texas. But also, I didn't expect to talk about Nick Saban winning his 8th national championship, or I should say, the prospect of him winning his 8th national championship so soon. For perspective here, Oklahoma, my favorite team, has been playing football for more than 125 years, won 7 national championships. Ohio State, basically the same amount of time, has won 8 national championships. Michigan has won 11 national championships, but nobody has won more national championships since 2003 than the Nick Saban program, a.k.a. The Process. A man who personifies outcomes are a distraction. The point is the details. Forget the scoreboard. Did you execute on every single play? This is a man who's still getting into his players' behinds up a million, right, against FCS opponents, because that's how he is wired and that's how he wants his teams to be wired. And I'm grateful to say that we live in an era like this one where I get to tell all the kids, hey, look, it's not that the Saban stories are untrue. It's that, if anything, those stories, have been watered down because he's been that great. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, we have the Michigan Wolverines, who, while Saban is chasing his professional legacy, we're talking about a number one ranked Michigan team that might be the best Michigan team we've seen since 1997, but in the process has turned Ric Flair heel in an attempt to become extraordinary and kind of personifying Eddie Guerrero with being accused of we lie, we cheat, we steal, while they also go, we fight, we win. You know what I'm saying? That's where Michigan is. And I think it's getting even more out of hand when we look at the stories on the Michigan side of the ball. Number one, Jim Harbaugh and all that he represents. It's a man that could coach half the regular season and not only win a national championship, but go 15-0 in the process, on top of what has been a tremendous turnaround since 2021. Harbaugh missed the first 3 games, right? After misleading NCAA investigators over recruiting violations. Okay. Then he sat out the final 3 regular season games after the NCAA launched its investigation into their electronic sign stealing, which spanned over 3 years in 34 stadiums, and one dude named Connor Stallions. All right, cool. Then they went and beat Ohio State for the 3rd time. Then Harbaugh was offered $125 million in 10 years, only if he doesn't go to the NFL, and he still might go to the NFL. The NCAA leveled more violations at Michigan just before Christmas, and Jim's brother, John Harbaugh, has the best team in the NFL, the best player, Lamar Jackson, in the NFL, and beat Jim straight up in the Super Bowl. I kind of think that winning a national championship for Jim Harbaugh ain't going to mean that much when he goes to dinner with his brother, because his brother got the ring. He got the ring everybody chasing, and the one we still think that Jim Harbaugh wants, because as much winning as he has done at the University of Michigan over the last 3 years, every single year we're talking about whether or not this man is going to be an NFL head coach. And perhaps this is that season, especially if he wins a national championship, in which case I believe Michigan fans will clap for him on the way out, because that's all they want. They want to win a national championship. They want to do it this way, going 15-0, and they got a shot here. Now, I think it's important to notice the last time that Harbaugh and Michigan played against Saban and Alabama, they got pantsed in the Citrus Bowl. And I say that because it's true. Like, it's almost like Nick Saban and Alabama were Scott Summers looking at Wolverine after hollering at Gene Gray, okay? Like, they didn't take this the way that I thought they would. They were absolutely coming for their heads. And I know this because Najee Harris went for 136, two TDs. Jerry Jeudy went for 6 catches, 204 yards. And Matt Jones went 19 of 25, 327 in a 35-16 win. Alabama acted like a team that knows how to win a New Year's Day, New Year's Six bowl game. Michigan hadn't done that in the college football era, and that is also college football playoff era. That is also the reason why I think Alabama is sitting pretty in the Rose Bowl. They know what it takes. This is their 8th appearance in the college football playoff since its inception. That's ridiculous. Meanwhile, Michigan's been here twice. Got beat down by an SEC opponent named Georgia, then got embarrassed by Texas Christian in Glendale, Arizona. Okay? It ain't been looking good for the Wolverines once they get to this high altitude where winning is necessary and where we really get to separate the greats from the elite. Are you elite or not? Right? That's the way that Kirby Smart would put it. It turns out Alabama showed with a win against number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs that they are indeed elite. But again, it's about the players on the field, players on this large stage. Hit your marks. Don't flub your lines. Judgments will be made. Respect will be paid. Okay? You want to leave a legacy? This is one of those games where you get to do that, which is a great way to start talking about the young squires and the keys to the game. All right? So I'm going to start with Alabama here. For me, it's real simple. Jalen Milroe, you got to get mobile, dog. Like, Jalen Milroe still holds the ball too long. And I say that as an absolute Jalen Milroe stan. But as soon as that man learns to get rid of the football, he's going to be lethal. Even now, he's a terror on a football field because he's been growing with each passing game he plays. After getting benched, I might add, after throwing 2 picks against Texas in a 10-point loss, right? He earns his way back onto the field, and he's done nothing but be great. He's had a 10-1 TD to INT ratio in Bama's last 5 games. Those are including LSU and Georgia. And I include LSU here because LSU got to see what he could do with the full dose. 155 yards on the ground, 4 TDs, on top of throwing for a chunk of change against that LSU defense. Now, keeping Milroe upright is also going to be paramount for Alabama. That's my number 2 for their key to the game. Look, the Tide have allowed 43 sacks this season. That's just not good. It's not good. Second most in the SEC. But they've also managed to learn how to play cleanly lately, allowing just 8 sacks in their last 5 games. Now, at the skill positions, they're not really awesome. They're good. They're good, right? They got Isaiah Bond out there, right? They got Roydell Williams in the backfield. They got Jam Miller for what they can do out there. You know, look, they even got a Jermaine Burton, who I think you would say is your big play guy, but not a 1,000-yard receiver, right? It's really an offense that I think is the one Nick Saban most loves to run. One that stays out of the way of his ridiculous defense. Lets the defense go to work. And I think that is going to be really the story of this game, is these 2 defenses are outstanding and which quarterback can make plays. And I'm giving that to Jalen Milroe, not necessarily because I just think he's a better quarterback than J.J. McCarthy, and we'll get to that, but also because Georgia chose to double spy this man, and they still couldn't stop him moving around, making plays with his feet. I've never seen a defense, let alone the by God Georgia defense, commit 2 men to personally tracking the quarterback, and still they couldn't do nothing with him. Like that for me is enough. That makes him the most dangerous player on the football field when he is on the football field. If Milroe can make plays, then Alabama has an opportunity to not just beat Michigan, but to win an 8th national championship in, my goodness, since 2009, which is ridiculous, right? I mean, a 7th national championship since 2009. It would be 8th of Nick Saban's. But I'm getting in my way on this because I've always thought that 2020 Alabama team was going to be the peak. Like I still think that's the greatest team that he has ever coached, Nick Saban. Yet, if this team wins a national championship, it will be one of his greatest coaching efforts. And you know what? Also, pour one out for Miss Terry, who's doing all the work on the other end. Like, one of the things I learned about Nick Saban and how he's great is he's got a partner. If he's the CEO, she's the COO, right? All roads run through her. And because they're able to do this thing together, he's continuing to win into his 70s. I think that's remarkable. And I also believe that more head coaches should make their wives a fundamental part of the football program and not just to run their damn foundation. You get what I'm saying? If you want to get it like they got it, it's right there. They're showing you the blueprint over the last 40 plus years, even raising a family in the middle of all this chaos. Now, let's move to Michigan. Talk about the keys to the game for them. I would like, in the words of Detroit's own Marshall Mathers III, will the real J.J. McCarthy please stand up? Okay? You got Jada from the block making you some Rose Bowl cleats. It's time for you to put on like you the best dude on that football team, all right? Before the sign stealing, we're talking about, or before the sign stealing was made public, we're talking about J.J. McCarthy being outstanding. 14 TDs, 10.6 yards per attempt passing. Since November 4th, or about 2 weeks after the NCAA announced its investigation into the sign stealing that allegedly was going on at Michigan, he's thrown just 1 TD. 1. Okay? It kind of makes you think maybe knowing the other team's defenses was kind of helpful to him and the play calling on the other side of that ball. Now, this also is, I think, interesting to point out, that passing TD that he threw, right? It ain't necessarily indicative of how good Michigan has been, because it's a team that's built on run the football, and it's a team that's built on defense. That said, didn't throw a pass TD against Purdue, even though he went for 300 yards, or Penn State, or Maryland. And I also think that he hadn't thrown for more than 150 yards in any of those games, okay? They have not aired the ball out. Some of this, again, is the offense that Michigan runs. They want to run the ball. They want to play ball control, and they want to give their defense opportunities to get 3 and outs, get it back off the field, hand the ball over to the offense to basically sit on it. But we're talking about them also playing top 20 defenses. Like, they played 3 in their last 5 games. Now, that including Iowa, right, and Ohio State, which ain't no easy wins on either one of those. But also you got Roman Wilson, you got Cornelius Johnson, you got Colston Loveland. None of those dudes have more than 42 catches, 663 yards all season. And this is with a team that had been blowing people out all year long. So you got opportunities to go get those garbage time yards if that's what you were interested in, but that's not, right? I also think it's important to note it might not get better for J.J. McCarthy against this Alabama pass D because it's a top 25 pass D, giving up just 189 yards passing per game, which, by the way, is about 39 more than what you could expect from J.J. McCarthy over the last 5 games. Also one in which the O-line is going to have to be dominant. Like, there's 7 guys in Sharon Moore's position group that could be drafted in 2024 alone, okay? They ain't exactly played like that all year, though. You could hear that criticism when I did the live tailgate with Chris Howard and Beanie Wells at the Ohio State-Michigan game. He was very critical of this offensive line because it's not as good as the offensive line was last year that won the Joe Moore Award. That said, Michigan still ranked, pretty highly in rush yards, just not very high compared to, well, their opponents. So they're number 6 in the Big Ten. Running for 162 yards a game, which is about they went from 199 a game last year, so about 37 yards fewer, which is a chunk of change. It also reflects in what the running backs have done. Now, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are great, but they aren't as good as they were last year, according to the numbers. They're just not as impressive. For instance, right? Blake Corum rushed for over 20 TDs, leads the FBS in rushing TDs this season, but he isn't as explosive as he was last year. As a matter of fact, I got it right here. He had 7 explosive rushes of 20 yards or more, this season. Last season, without playing against Ohio State or the Big Ten championship or against Texas Christian in the Fiesta Bowl, he had 15. Okay, they just haven't been able to get that dude running the way that he was running last year. Some of that might be coming off of a knee injury. Some of that might be coming off of the play calling. And Donovan Edwards has been great catching the ball out of the backfield, but he hasn't necessarily been great running the ball. I would like one of those dudes to absolutely take over if they expect to beat this Alabama defense, which has been really, really great. But the Michigan defense might be able to give them really the charge that they need because it's complete. Like, they're very fun to watch up front with Junior Colson and Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. It's also a defense that is predicated on being able to take advantage of your mistakes. Like, Mike Sanders still is an undersized defensive back, but he reminds me of what Jabril Peppers was for them, where he can kind of do it all, right? 5 INTs. He's getting in the backfield for tackles for loss. Probably their best defensive back player since Dax Hill, right? He got it like that. He's going to have a big game. He's going to have to take away number 1, number 2, number 3 at one point or another, because I guarantee Tommy Rees is going to move his better players away from that guy and probably try to take advantage of what they can get in one-on-one coverage out on the numbers. And I think that's really going to be where a battle is won or lost in big plays. And those big plays in this sort of a game could be the ones to separate, because if Alabama can go up by a couple of scores, that feels like a game that Michigan can't win. It's just not built to come from behind down a couple possessions, especially late into the game. Whereas at the very least, Alabama has shown it can go get a big play when it needs to go get a big play. Ask Auburn about the Gravedigger, 4th and 31, if you want to know what I'm really talking about. But again, it's not going to be yards per play because Michigan is really good, right? Number 4 in yards per play this season. They got outstanding tacklers in Mike Barrett. I mentioned Junior Colson, and they'll get into the backfield, right? It's about, can they get Jalen Milroe down to the ground, and can they stop Alabama running the football? Because if you're going to force Jalen Milroe to throw balls over the middle, you got a real chance to win. He's just not strong in the intermediate passing game. He either has to throw it short or throw it deep. If you try to make him throw it in that 10 to 15-yard range, you probably have an opportunity to pick him off. Now, all that said, I genuinely believe Alabama is going to beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. I love what Nick Saban has done. I love that this team knows what it is like to lose and get an opportunity to earn redemption. And Georgia's a better football team than Michigan. That's been the thought, right? Is when you put Georgia head-to-head against Michigan, Michigan takes an L. If Alabama can go beat Georgia in a de facto home game, which is what it is when you play in Atlanta against the Georgia Bulldogs, then you can go beat this Michigan team in the Rose Bowl. And then psychologically, Nick Saban, okay, cool. I know who Jim Harbaugh is. I know who Michigan is. I know what to do with them. And Jalen Milroe's up for this, right? You also got some outstanding players on the other side in Kool-Aid McKinstry, and maybe one of my favorite defensive backs when we're talking about football names. But goodness me, if they're not great when you want to go shutting people down, because Terrion Arnold continues to just be the Trayvon Diggs of this sport, meaning he could get hit for a 70-yard pass play. It could probably happen. He could also pick off 2 passes, right? You're going to take that if you are coaching that defense. And I also think that all things being equal, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Roydell Williams, Jam Miller, Roman Wilson versus Jermaine Burton, right? Isaiah Bond versus Cornelius Johnson, J.J. McCarthy versus Jalen Milroe. I think it's going to come down to who can outcoach whom. And I'm always going to pick Nick Saban. It's not shade to Jim Harbaugh. I picked Nick Saban against Bill Belichick. I picked Nick Saban against Bill Walsh, right? I think that Nick Saban is the greatest football coach who has ever lived, and this is going to be an opportunity for him and the Alabama Crimson Tide to prove it. If you like what you've seen, consider subscribing to the #1 college football show on YouTube, the Fox Sports app, or wherever you get your podcast.